Welcome to Portals of Perception and to the Universalis Research Project number 3. I'm here with Karen Heney and Kyriaki Nikandrou. Karen, Kyriaki, welcome.
Good to be here, Aviv and Karen.
Hello, Aviv and Kyriaki. It's brilliant to be here today.
Well, so I'm obviously in a different setup to where I usually am. I'm today in a resort outside Lisbon, Portugal, on the Iberian shore, and I'm here to lead a strategy event this coming week for a Silicon Valley company, leadership team from a Silicon Valley company. This is part of the strange, fantastical, and challenging life that I get to live, where in one part I am on the leading edge of strategy and innovation work with leadership teams, and in another part, I hope I'm also together with you on the leading edge of developmental and evolutionary inquiry about us humans and where we are proceeding as a species. And so integrating these streams by itself has been an exercise that I have embraced. We integrated the story of that in the Portals backstory, which anybody and everybody can read on portalsofperception.org. And the essence of which is that I've discovered that by integrating these endeavor streams and these dimensions, you become a merging point of those streams. I became a merging point of those streams, which is both challenging and charming to live into the discovery of that, and in several ways relates to our research. So today we want to build on the first two explorations and go deeper into space making and into the art of inquiry. And so let me ask you first, is there anything that's alive for you right now as we launch this third foray expedition into this inquiry of the Universalis Project? Is there anything that's alive for you by way of bridging from chapter 2 to chapter 3?
Yes, I'd like to have a go. And I was thinking today that behind any inquiry or any loom, there is a why we do it. There is a potent desire. There is the identification of the need. That is a propulsion that gives you the energy to want to research that, to want to deepen. And for me today, this need and this potent desire is really a desperation, a sense of desperation on the human situation, on what world will I inherit to the next generations, into the critical and maybe dramatic situations that humans today experience, whether in their daily life or in extreme situations. So I really think that our whole way of thinking, our whole way of operating needs upgrade. And I see the urgency of really discovering a new operating system, a new ethos, a new way of going on. And this needs to start by a different consciousness in the way we perceive, in the way we think, in the way we educate, the young generations. So I think the clock is ticking in a way. The clock is ticking, and both from outside, from the different crises that maybe are reaching a point of no return, but also the inside clock is ticking, because things are ready to pop now in the human. And I'm glad we are together, and that's that I'm not walking alone in the dark, but together we can maybe shed some light in these territories.
Yes, thank you, Kyriaki. I'm going to pause with one word because I think I know how you mean it. It needs clarification or definition, which is the word desperation. Often people would use this word in a particular context, say personal desperation. I intuit and I hear in what you're saying that you're describing a sense of urgency that's both personal and is also beyond personal. It's on behalf of humanity at large as a species sense of urgency against a collective ticking clock and a collective timing, and if you like, even a universal clock. That's how I internalized what you meant by this word. Is there any furthering definition you'd offer to desperation in the way you talked about it?
Yes, yes, exactly, the sense of urgency, and maybe desperation is that I don't exclude myself. It's a more embodied sense of urgency, in the sense that sometimes I think that we are at the edge of a cliff and we need to make a jump as a humanity, as a species.
And let me just pause you there, because the metaphor could be confusing for some. You didn't mean jump off the cliff to kill ourselves, but what you mean is walk forward by way of doing it, and to reveal our age, to do an Indiana Jones, to walk into mid-space and trust that something will carry you through. The distinction in the word desperation is there is a difference between despair and desperation. You're describing a sense of energy that's translated into action in the interior and possibly exterior sense that channels the perception and the perspective of this time into a directional application of a life, of a purposeful living that express those values and those importances.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And the importance in what you offered is that we need to source the energy of that when we embark on any project, on any research, because it's the reasons why we choose to do something that will determine whether we get tired after 5 minutes or after 5 hours, or whether we'll never get tired, because we are tethered in our intention and reasons to something that we experience as universal, and therefore it is evergreen. It never gets tired. Yeah? So right there you're offering a practice, which is whenever you embark on something that you feel is important, first tether yourself, connect yourself to the reasons why, and let those resources, those sources in you guide the endeavor. Karen, what would you bring as an offering from your deliberation as we're bridging from chapter 2 to chapter 3 in this Universalis research?
All right. Well, within the context of what Kyriaki has beautifully platformed, the thread I would like to bring forward is to do with meaning, and the context of recording number 2 had a very profound trace. Aviv went through some very crucial key elements that brought us to where we are now and some of the inquiries and aspects we're looking at. And this was Aviv's story, but what it reflected in this life was the meaningful journey of my life, and one would, can't think of the right word, but one would carry that over, that everyone listening to these recordings would touch something in their own lives, where you can locate some maybe significant moments that you might not have added together to do with our own very specific individual journeys and the utter importance of them, so that when we arrive at a point, or we never arrive, we're always carrying on, but there's a little bit more gravitas, a little bit more substance to add things up, add meaning, and then move on to the next phase. So again, coming back to the context of the platforming from Kyriaki, it's within that we bring our own lives into the story, and the work we do, the meanings we add, the locations. So that's where the bridging from journey 2 to where we are now on this journey and where we will go from today. I felt it was a very profound, very deepening in terms of sort of a fortification and a strengthening, to think we are not alone. We have great friends, yet we find it within our own lives.
Yes.
So I'll leave it there. That's
yeah.
The bridge.
Well, so there is a double helix message in what you're offering, Karen. This is a time when, especially young generations, in the deconstructive drive of post-modernity and post-postmodernity, time and again people find themselves driving back into themselves to find themselves as the end goal, as the end state. What you offered was the recognition that we've got to try and do two things. If you land up just with yourself, you've limited yourself so much, because it's in the tethering of self to the bigger prospects of human life that your greater potential is realized. And if you run towards that and forget to bring yourself up to date in the story to a point that you lose yourself, you end up with not very much either. So there is a double helix of retethering both ways, to be connected and tethered inside in self, and to be tethered and connected to a bigger inquiry that you choose to focus on, which leads us into today, because today is about inquiry. Now, what I want to do is I want to do just a brief bridging to where we landed, and you have both generated your own practice and created your own looms and loom work, and we will bring on screen today just a brief short visit with one of those from Karen, and we'll in the future bring more. Let me put it in context first and offer this. So, okay, the Universalis Research Project number 3, space making, which is the inquiry we've been on, and the art of inquiry. And where we explored last time was that we framed this entire research as an inquiry about the 1,000 faces of Homo Universalis. And we said, let's begin with space makers. And that brought us into loom work. And what we actually traced on episode 2 was an inquiry about space making through contemplation. And we integrated into it the inquiry as to why and how to contemplate. And that inquiry involved looking first at the challenge. The human is so very crowded within and without. The human is in a stop situation. The human is meant to be a self-starter. And that brought the focus into the need, which is to make space, to create space, to become tethered to a higher source, to let the universe discover its exalted dance in you. And then we looked at 3 process technologies: permanent line inquiry, loom work, and mindful devotional gazing. And so when I thought about this, I realized, well, the underlying process technology we are bringing to each of those 3 is actually inquiry. And I realized that the next natural step will be to go deeper into what do we mean by inquiry, what is the art of inquiry, and in that way we can build the next step. And as I reflected back on this loom, I said, yeah, it was there all along. That's the way that this way of working with looms is. Often it corroborates itself, because this was created almost 5 or 6 months ago, one morning before a conversation with Jeff Vanderkloot as a way of harvesting something from the 4-day weekend. And so I thought, okay, let us go deeper into space making and inquiry framing, and perhaps listening priests will come into it a little later. I mean, why are inquiry framers and listening priests in one box? Well, the short answer is because I ran out of boxes here. So I was cheating. I put 2 into 1, although there is a powerful connection between them. I think we want to go into inquiry framing and space making. And so you have each generated some work into this, and I think today on this occasion, how about if I brought one of the looms, in this case Karen, that you created, give you a chance to offer it, talk to it give it a voiceover as a bridging for what we are about to do next. So here it is. Please.
Right. Well, as you can see, the bottom 3 boxes really focused on the concept of overcrowding, which was a key element from the last recording. And the way I looked at it was, I mean, there are many ways of looking at it, so this is not definitive and it's not the only way, but it was to begin to make inroads into it, to begin to separate out some of the key elements. And so the 3 threads and they each have a journey. So they start in the crowded world that we live in. The first is we get overwhelmed. Everything wants to draw on our energy, and we end up with a bit of a confusion as to, well, what exactly do we want to grow? Do we want to use our energies for? The second confusion or overcrowdedness was the sheer bombardment of, there are always new combinations. If you think of music, fashion, ideas, ways, media, there's a sheer bombardment on our senses all the time, and that can be, again, overwhelming and cluttering up. And the third is the amount of polarization which comes often through the localness of opinions, disorder, personal bias, all the unthought out agendas of modern living. So this paints quite a kind of rather dark picture of confusion and chaos and the limiting of the human potential individually and collectively. So each of these threads, I thought, well, let's look at them separately. So the first, in terms of energy, was looked at, well, we live in a world that is programmed, well, the world, the planet, the whole way that organic life exists is to do with growth and the cycles of growth that we experience all the time. It's very hard to talk about this in a short way because these are very huge domains. So I'm being trying to extract the key threads in a simplistic way. So the first pathway, which goes from the overwhelmed energy depletion, is to be mindful of the cycles of growth and to begin to recognize that one has a choice about what one may want to grow. Obviously, externally, you can grow things physically, but in terms of one's inner life, inner values, expressions, what you want to nurture and actually take right through to a harvest. And that does ultimately come down to separating out and deciding, very much to do with your own choice and decisions. So that's the first trajectory. The second one, where it talks about things being cluttered up and the overwhelmingness, is to look at the threads of what is going on in your mind. If you feel that you're cluttered up, write it out, separate it out, think about it, and then decide which threads have a value for you, which are maybe connected to the natural order and the way of things, and begin to think about that through your own intentions, your own purpose, your own trajectories. And there's a lot more, again, that can be said about that, but that's an initial way of beginning to separate things out in terms of decluttering. And the third trajectory is to do with being able to move away from the isolated singularity of bias and opinions and polarizations. And what occurred there was I've been practicing this in my own mind. It's a little bit like creating a room in my mind where I bring in other things that have more truth and have more context, so that nothing is in isolation or in a polarity, and begin to work with things within a a deeper, more holistic context. So there's less isolation. And this trajectory begins to touch into domains. So something that may be an isolated thought or instinct idea may connect to a huge domain that is, if the trajectory is taken to a much larger extent, has connections to other intelligences, maybe that assist with healing or education or all the big issues that the world needs. But as a starting place, I've begun to create a little room in my mind. And when things become polarized, I think, okay, what friends can I bring to join them to soften it, to bring into a multiplicity and bring it into a bigger context? So all these three are talking about taking something, they're either separating something out or they're joining it with friends that are connected to greater truths or realities, such as the cycles. And they're very simple, practical ways of beginning to move from the cluttering and introducing into your own mentality in your own way. And these are three that kind of, in a way, they inform me. And I thought, well, okay, let's try them. And I'm finding that they're working. Yeah. And I said they're not definitive, but they're examples.
Thank you. Beautiful. May I offer some thoughts and feedback comments? Okay. The power of this is, first of all, that you've created the loom right away within 24, 48 hours after our last recording. So what you've demonstrated, number one, is this idea that what you talked to at the beginning, you've got to bring your life into what you do. So in this case, I offered a certain framework. You said, great, this is what works for Aviv. I have to actually create something that comes from my life where I can apply myself. So that's number one in terms of the power of application and bringing yourself into the process. The second thing that works here effectively is that you've created a beautiful loom. Now, the third comment I'll offer is that you're clearly approaching this a bit in the direction of a do-it-yourself, self-help kind of a facility, right? And within that, again, what works is that you're authentic to yourself. Where it becomes conductive is when you talk about the way your mind works is, for example, you imagine a room. You're a bit of a designer, a bit of an artist, a bit of an architect. So you are actually using the scaffolds of your mind to address the opportunity at hand. To make this loom into a teaching tool, I would propose one or two refinements. The first is that the line at the bottom, the overcrowd, is like the diagnostic. And I would potentially encourage you to say, well, could I frame the diagnostic lens and create some binary framing there? Like, for example, the crowded from without and the crowded from within. And populate these one next to the other. You may need more than 3 boxes for that. But have those both articulated, one next to the other. The second thing it will probably need for it to become an effective teaching tool, if somebody was just to embark on this journey with you, is that you went quite directly from the diagnostic to the practice brief of what to do about it. And in a way, it assumes that a person has matured in their decision that they want to do something about it, which is authentic and true to you because you've been on a journey with these kind of inquiries for many years. So if you were to make this a tool into a coaching, a teaching facility where somebody is just embarking on this inquiry of, do I want to do something about the practice of space making in my life as part of a developing life, there is probably a layer, a process layer, that needs to bridge from diagnostic to here is what you do about it, which invites the person to the experience and the feeling and the perception and the need to make a choice about it. And do you choose to make a choice about it? Do you choose to take a position, to step up in yourself, to respond to that? And somehow framing a narrower bridge, which is essentially an invitation to, well, will you live a life where this is done unto you, and or are you choosing to be the self-authoring agent of your life, where you elect to shape the cosmology of influences in your life? And there may be a whole more foundational tool that would be needed to in this bridging, which is more about what you choose to say yes to and what you will choose to say no to. Those things you choose to give credence to and bring more of into your life, against those things that you may, dimensions, influences, that you may say, I actually choose to not direct the precious time and energy and focus of my life to those, and simply giving us, or giving the person you are leading in the discovery, the empowered sense of you can choose. You have the power to choose, and that is actually the beginning of the definition of sovereignty. Your agency and sovereignty begins with what you choose to direct yourself to, and then because of that, you can choose to decide for yourself what you want to seed, nurture, and grow to, and so on. It's almost as though what you take as a given because you've lived into that choice, that step needs to be slowed down and more fully articulated, and make that invitation. So that's the main feedback offering that I will propose here, and then lead us into these beautiful practices and make them as concrete and then as expensive and as vast. And just knowing your work, each of those leads to a picture of some sort and a more visual representation even than words, right? So all that is to be discovered in the future. Thank you, Karen, for this offering.
That is wonderful. It's such a valuable step, because it really, as you were talking about it, it drew me back into the bigger context that we started with, and it would enable or allow each life to actually find themselves in that bigger context, rather than escaping the cluttering or the
right.
narrow. Yes, so thank you very much. Very valuable.
That's right. So this is such a powerful message there, and a segue to what we want to go into in the furtherance of today's conversation, and also in the next one, just to codify again in language, because it belongs to the first thing you offered. And then before I proceed into the next slides, I'd like to see if Kyriaki, if you want to make any observation on this so far. Our job as facilitators, counselors, coaches, leaders, is time and again to facilitate that double helix of open a path forward, and open that path forward both inside the person and outside of them. So potentially introduce a new idea, a new space to move into. How do we choreograph that discovery? And how do we facilitate it such that it brings the person inside to discover themselves in that new space? So there is never, well, I don't know that there is never, but at least that we are trying to address the trap of the map or the idea or the vision becoming a replacement of living on the inside. Because what we are proposing is not an ideology or as something that anyone should do. More than anything, this Universalis research, and literally anything we do on portals, is an invitation for people to discover how they can approach the inquiries of their life with those starters. So the facilitation essence is this double helix, connecting to possibility outside of us, or in terms of the greater field of potential, and connecting forever to that greater field of potential on the inside, or else it's a two-dimensional, even imposition of one person's idea onto another person's mind, and as an imprint, which is not at all the way we are approaching this, and certainly not the way we are framing the journey inquiry into Universalis. The prospect of Homo Universalis is not about humans somewhere else, some other time, in some other galaxy. No, it actually is to do with the humans that we are today, and the birthing of that potential that Kyriaki spoke to earlier, in terms of sensing that sense of urgency. So, and any bridging comment from you, Kyriaki, on the work from Karen and what I'm offering there as a bridging coaching comment?
Yeah, I want to say that it was excellent to Karen, and really inspiring. I could stay for hours. I could see a whole seminar. Especially something that caught me is the natural cycles. What are the natural cycles, beyond the seasons, or what maybe are each one's cycles, or maybe it have to do with the ages, or maybe with the universal cycles, and all kind of inquiries started to flow from there. And also I see in your reflection, Aviv, and definitely that applies to my loom as well, is that what is our experience and our journey should not, let's say, be as, we must not make the assumption, if we are trying to help someone else, that he or she is in the same position, or has done the same journey, or should do the same journey. And how really to open up through questions or through reflections, really to take someone by the hand and walk together, let's say, or promenade into what is the next step, what is the next elevation, what is the next plateau. So I see a value in your reflection. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And inside it, an important tool is forever to be watchful and reflective and self-challenging on our own biases. Like, if you're going to present a picture, and I know you took it from the room where I initially introduced the idea of space making. But here you're making a new, fresh approach. And if you begin with how overcrowded and overwhelming, well, if somebody comes into it, first thing, they can experience that as a projection and as a bias. So how would you create and integrate and include that this is a particular aspect you are focusing on now in this postmodern phase as part of the challenge of living into the catalyzing the greater human potential, and offer scaffolds, because the risk is if we begin by saying, well, this is a very overcrowded world and because of it, and so on and so forth, somebody can either say, yeah, I say that and I agree with that, or you lose them because in a way, even there they needed an onboarding path that will offer them a way to make a choice about how they look at the prospect of their life. So a simple way to do that is to begin this where you said, talk about the media and the experience of media today, what that is. So enough of my coaching. Now I'm going to lead us into the next step so you can give me back coaching about what works and what doesn't work, because this is an open space. We are all coaching each other on the journey. And let's see if I can walk my talk and do what I just practice what I just offered as my own invitation. So here, this is where we were. Okay, and what we said is that we want to go deeper into space making and inquiry framing. Okay, so it occurred to me that indeed the place to begin is, if we want to go deeper into the art of inquiry, let's develop some inquiries about the art of inquiry. So I love that. So actually that is the beginning. And say, okay, let's develop some inquiries about the art of inquiry. And I love staring at the blank page because it creates a summoning, an invitation. And then I said, okay, let's begin with those 9 different times. It'll be 12 or 16, but that gives me enough space to put something in each one of those. And then I said, where do I go next? And I said, I think this is where we're going to go next. If we're going to frame some inquiries about the art of inquiry, let's frame some starters through the power of why, the leverage of why, some through the leverage of what, and some through the lens of how. And another time we'll talk about the color code, but I've chosen green for why, blue for what, and red for how. And the place I begin this is simply asking, why do we humans ask questions? Why is this such a unique and differentiating human trait. Okay, so what is it about us humans that's framing question that loves to, what is it that we love so much to ask questions? I obviously have the experience of my granddaughter. She is 3.5 years young, and just recently I spent a couple of days with her, and I say something, she says, why? And I answer the why, and she says, but why? And I answer that why, and she says, but why? So you can get the feeling, the living registration that the why, the emergence of why is developmentally such an important formative phase. It's like a fountain of inquiry that's awaking. It's not a mental thing. It's a whole person, whole life inquiry in her. But why do I need to drink water? No. But why do I need to wear underwear? Like, why on just about anything? And why is this a unique and differentiating human trait? And then, why do inquiries open new possibility vistas? Possibility vistas in terms of new perception, new appreciation, new feeling, new experience. What is it about inquiries that when we use those, and why it is so that the inquiry, as we are right in the context for what we are exploring here, is a way to open new space, to open new vista of possibilities. And then, why do inquiry-based conversations can lead, and often in my experience have led, to transformational results? And as we will get to later, because of that, what's the way to use these? So, a different time, I could go to 3 other starters. I've chosen here to go to these first 3 why starters to live into the inquiry about inquiries. Let me just pause here and see if anything comes up in you before I go to the what and the how starters.
I think the only thing that I would wish to share is that as each came on the screen, there was just this incredible sense of how inquiries open space.
Right.
And yeah, and what that portends. So
Right, and as we have spoken in our previous recording about the mechanics, the process mechanics of a loom, framing a question inside this space is truly bringing to life the idea that what we are looking to facilitate when we cultivate looms as a contemplative methodology, as a contemplative tool, each of those spaces is a portal. And our greater interest is discovering what's inside each one of these, and then how they interrelate. Which leads me now into the what. And I said, okay, let's begin with what is the developmental and evolutionary significance of the capacity to inquire. I just shared an example of me witnessing a 3-year-old little beautiful girl, and she is waking up to her why inquiry capacity. And what is that developmental significance in the evolution of a life? How she begins to corroborate the meaning map of her environment, because she is literally, by asking these questions, she is probing and prodding the environment around her to see what comes back, which is how she prints in her brain the 3D topography map of meaning of the world that she builds in her own experience. And then in the broader sense, the human as a species, evolutionary journey, what is the development and evolutionary significance of the capacity to inquire? And I deliberately chosen these two words, one next to the other, as we will see in a little bit. And then the loom said, well, let's now ask in an even more concrete way, what unlocking change potential can be found through inquiry? And where inside it do questions and inquiries come from? Right? So do inquiries, do they come from inside or do they come from outside of us, from the environment? Or do certain inquiries co-arise in us and in the greater space around us? Sometimes the trigger may be outside of us. On other occasions, the trigger would be from the inside. And in certain situations, it will be co-arising. And what is this unlocking potential that can be found through inquiry? Is a way of working with inquiry contemplatively with oneself and with others. And then again, to demonstrate that you can take the what and move all along the spectrum from the philosophical, the theological, the ontological, evolutionary, developmental inquiry, all the way to a pragmatic, personal, you now manage your life and your development journey by saying, what questions do you choose to focus on? What specific inquiries energize, inspire, and connect you to the experiences, feelings, resources that you want to be connected to, such that you are powered into whatever endeavor you choose to power yourself into. If you are pursuing the Olympic Games and wanting to chase the gold in the 5K run, you'll have a specific set of inquiries, which is how do you build yourself exactly to top form? And you'll have all sort of what inquiries about your strategy in building up for the race and in the race itself. Or you may say, right, I want to run the 5K run of my life, which is the living of a life where the 5K is more a metaphor. And how do I build the resources for that? And we can each choose to use our metaphor in the example you offered earlier, Karen, which is beautiful and powerful, and I'm sure we will come back to it, the design of a room. Sometime we will talk about it as the design of the mansion of your life, you as a mansion. And so you will ask, what rooms are in the mansions of my life? And then what are the furnitures and the artwork in each one of these rooms, such that they become best, most optimally facilitative for whatever it is that you want each of these rooms to enable and facilitate. And then the how inquiry, well, it's suggested, the loom suggested, because the loom has a life of itself, suggested that place to begin is how do you frame potent inquiries? Because what we are endeavoring to demonstrate here is not something you just configure in your brain as a way to ask a question. What would be a potent framing of an inquiry that your life, in the way that Kyriaki, you talked about it, the sense of importance and urgency and what is your life is all about, will resonate and will be invited to the party through that inquiry. That really is the art of inquiry as a way of engaging the contemplative potential, living as a way of contemplation. And then, okay, let's bring something pragmatic and practical into this, because again, I'm keen that we see the full spectrum. How do we use inquiries in relationships? How do we use inquiry in relationships when we have wonderful times? And how do we use inquiries in relationships when we struggle? How do we use inquiries in counseling? How do we use inquiries in leading? I mean, I'm here to launch this week a strategy event. What am I going to be doing this entire week? I'm going to be leading a senior executive team through a loom of inquiries. That is essentially how I lead the strategy event. What is a strategy? A strategy is a loom of inquiries. And that's the methodology. So I've taken this way of and this set of tools all the way into the philosophical and the spiritual and the practical, all the way to business and such. And finally, in this loom, how do you live into your inquiries as a questing meditation prayer, which is the essence of what I'm describing when I'm using the term permanent line inquiry. That means fashioning an inquiry that continues to operate in your life even when you're asleep. Certainly when you go for a run, when you go for a swim. I just arrived in Lisbon yesterday. What did I do this morning? I have an inquiry of how I am adjusting into the ecology and what is the nature of the ecology that I'm in and what is it promoting in me, and there is always a calibration of how am I catching up through the time zone. So I'm living into these inquiries. So what did I do this morning? It's the mid-60s here, temperature-wise. I went for a swim because I said I'm not going to come to Lisbon and not actually taste the Atlantic Ocean from this side, having been swimming every day on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean in Florida. So, but the water temperature is much colder. So me diving into the ocean is a form of inquiry, and how I live into the inquiry of my reciprocal nature with the environment and the ecology that I'm in, and how do I accelerate the recovery value of flying through these time zones such that I'm in the energetic and mental zone, number one, for our conversation today, and number two, for the body of work that's in front of us. So this is an example of how it's not just a mental thing and writing words on a slide and or a loom. It's truly a way of living into how you are sensing and registering and experiencing every aspect of your life all the time. It's a form of dialogue, inner dialogue with your inner lives. And for me, one of the first things I'll do in the morning is I go for a run, very gentle run, because I do this every morning, everywhere where I'm traveling, anywhere in the world, and it tells me where I am in my recovery process. and it tells me something about the ecology. Many years ago, when I arrived first time to run an event in Berlin, I felt so energized. And I had an inquiry, what was it about the land in Berlin that it's as though I was floating in the air? And a few years later, I discovered that, yeah, Berlin is where they break all the records in the marathon. So there is something about the land in Berlin that energetically lifts you up, in spite of the very difficult history that also occurred there. So there is there an inquiry about an ecology and about the visible, but also the invisible, energetic nature of the ecology, and how do I harmonize with that ecology. I'd have the similar kind of inquiry when I visited Yellowstone. And I discovered that I didn't want to spend too much time next to the geysers, and that I wanted to be more by the lakes, and had my own diagnostic discovery. I'm demonstrating that living into inquiry with your inner process, with your inner discovery, is a tool of facilitation into whatever it is that you are exploring in your life, is a never-ending prayerful meditation about the nature of human life and what it is that you are seeking to facilitate. I'm so highly aware that I'm going to be stepping into working with a group of people, this group of leaders this week, and it's not about the words or the concepts that I'll introduce them to. It's more about how can I introduce a catalyst, an enzyme into the collective operating system of them as a team that can unlock for them new possibilities that they couldn't access on their own before. So the questions, the inquiries, is one dimension. Being well harmonized to the ecology, the place, their needs, and me being in service to their prospective future is another dimensions of living into inquiry as a questing meditational prayer. Let me pause here and give you a chance to speak to whatever comes up in you. And then what I want to do is I want to take just two samples here, two of the spaces, and demonstrate how I go deeper into two of them. We'll take one why space and one what space and build more into that. So please.
Yeah, I want to say that it's very inspiring, this loom, that somehow it connects me with this powerful energy of wanting to discover, wanting to research, finding the reasons why of things, not staying in the first reading, but penetrating to a second reading, a third reading of things, and then what this magical energy that is released when you really challenge things and not stay in the phenomena, but dive deeper. And this is such a powerful skill of the human and ability. And it's interesting also that maybe we are, programmed somehow into a different domain of questions. I can see it, let's say, in my children. They were, let's say, the core inquiries of their lives were slightly different in each one of them, and they're still operating. And there are many questions from there, how we can use inquiries, as you say, in the relationships, in education, in business environments as you are, and how to identify these inquiries that will make a difference, that are, let's say, in the core vein of things, and that will bring the right questions, will bring in the right questions and the right frequencies and the right mindsets. And I'm wondering how you do it. I'm wondering how do you detect which questions, which inquiries are potent? Because I've seen you done this, Aviv, and you often find the inquiry that is really, let's say, on that day. And I'm wondering how you do it.
Well, we are inside the discovery of that. Thank you, Kyriaki. Karen, any thoughts here before we?
Yeah, it's to do with the multiplicity of things. It's almost like if you think of this analogy I used recently, actually, the idea of facets of a disco ball, and we are that great multiplicity. But if you think of each of those different facets having access to this energizing, as Kyriaki was talking about, and the depth and the range of all these inquiries, that is really what turns it on. It actually brings it to life. And that's really what I'm painting a picture here, because I'm sort of expressing what I'm feeling by the enlivening nature of inquiry. And it's opening up this whole new dimension. I won't say any more because it's more a sense than an imaging image, which is very evocative, I think.
Yes, thank you. Well, so you're now describing, Karen, that sense of the multiplicity. And you both describe that's the enlivening sense, and that is the essence of what we are sensing into with inquiry and the art of inquiry as something that opens and leads to energy potential, which is exactly where I want to lead into next, because I said, well, so let's build another layer here. Why do we humans ask questions? And again, why is it such a uniquely potent human trait? What is so special about it? Because, I mean, if you study birds, you'll say, well, yeah, humans are not the only species to use inquiries. If you listen to birds, they also ask each other questions, and the answer, fair enough. But mostly they have a set of questions and answers. Is there food here? Yes, there is food here. Is this place safe? Yes, this place is safe. So they sing to each other to send these messages. We are the only self-configuring species inside of which inquiry is such a critical element. And so I said, let's do something about this. So why do we humans ask questions? Well, inquiry is a validation tool. It's a way for us to corroborate what we observe and experience. You describe something you see, and you ask another person, are you seeing the same thing? Or are you seeing something different? So there is a corroboration. If you think the evolutionary biology of our cognitive capacity, first of all, we needed to corroborate what was danger and what was safe and what was good food and what was not so good food. So there is that dimension of inquiry in just the survival and the support of a life and the validation that creates. And then when you ask a question, when I ask you a question, we open a communication loop. We create something between us that's new, that was not there before. And further, when we frame an inquiry, we frame a field of possibility. So it's no longer just a space between the two of us or the three of us or whoever is here with us. It's the broader space of possibility that we're looking at that was framed by the inquiry. That is true in whether we want to play a game, whether we choose to go into business together, or whether we are addressing any challenge in the world. And when you look even deeper into inquiry, you say, well, inquiry is truly a tool, a mechanism of awareness becoming aware of itself. There is a verification, justification, corroborative function in the forever mapping, because whatever it is that we do, whoever we are with, whatever conversation we engage in, we are forever mapping the world in our interiority. And inquiry is how we make that process aware of itself, conscious of itself, such that we can test whether the map of meaning that we use is accurate or whether it needs updating. This is why two people sometime will find that they actually need to test what they mean by the words. Well, one person will say, this is very spicy, this food. And another person will say, well, in my continuum, it's only 2 stars. The other person will say, well, no, in my continuum, it's 5 stars in terms of how spicy it is. So you discover that words can express themselves on a continuum. Then it becomes a little more compound when they say, well, what do you mean when you say love? How do you mean when you say, I love you? What is the meaning of that word for you? What will you do and what will you choose to not do when you use this word, right? So this is an example of how inquiry is a facility that updates language, and through the updating of language, there is awareness becoming aware of itself and its own map making and sense making tool set. And then in the pragmatic sense of life, inquiry explores options. This is a core practice in my family. Whenever we faced a challenging situation, instead of rushing to solve the situation, we've developed a practice. We say, what are the possible options available for us in terms of how to solve this option? Because one of my observations about life has been that often what we rush to as the obvious solution is not necessarily the best solution. And simply by taking a step back and giving ourselves permission to breathe and ask what other alternatives are available, what optional pathways can we consider, right there, by framing that inquiry, we change already the stressful, challenging situation. Because often when you face a challenge, part of it is the whatever objective data points outside of you, but even more so, the challenge is the psychological configuration that you moved into in yourself. And by framing an inquiry, you change the topography in your interior, and you create for yourself pathways of possibilities. And the very idea that inquiry can unlock the emergent process of this moment. So, I mean, I created these slides on the flight to Lisbon. So you can say, well, you're not emergent. You've prepared this in advance, but I am emergent because I'm listening to how the slide shows up for me in the moment, and there is a lot of newness in what's emerging right now. This, which is, you can tell the energy of this is not a packaged, prepared in advance. I'm alive in the moment because I'm more interested in the new discovery that we can access in this moment in time, and living into, as we said earlier, into inquiry as a prayerful meditational quest is one of the most potent expressions of that is what I then describe as listening and inquiring to the inner lives and the cosmology within the fuller orchestra of lives you are, in the living theater that you are on the inside, and enabling those inner lives to play. Sometimes it's the violins, and sometimes it's the trumpets, and whatever voices come to the foreground to lead the orchestra is a way to describe the sense of unlocking an emergent process. What moves into the foreground, what recedes into the background, and sensing into that potential is truly living into inquiry. It's living as an open inquiry. And in most situations, people don't dare move into that cutting edge, leading edge in themselves for a variety of reasons, some political, social, conventional ways of imposing on oneself. But this right there, we are sensing now into the prospect that we are inviting in this idea of researching the broader universalis potential. When we talk about Homo Universalis, one of the hallmarks of this registration, this experience, Kyriaki, of what you said earlier at the beginning of this, a new model of life, a new operating system is arising now. One way to describe it is living into the portal of the inquiry that's emergent in the moment. Not needing to arrest ourselves in the answers we have today, but take any answer that shows up as a marker, as a journey marker on the way to the furtherance of that exploration. That is the invitation and the potency of unlocking, using inquiry to unlock an emergent process. So I left two boxes open in case you wanted to begin a sentence with inquiry, and putting you for a moment on the spot if you so choose, and just end that stem with whatever is alive for you about the significance of we humans. We are the species that self-configures and self-authors our way through inquiry.
I would say inquiry allows you to see yourself from an external point of view. Last night I was with a friend. We haven't met each other for some time, and we had a lot of news to share. We went to a place under the Acropolis, which is wow. It was wow to be there. And we just shared some challenges that we face currently, and each one was listening to the other, which is interesting, that listening, both internal listening, but also listening to someone else. And in a very light and soft way, we were reflecting, okay, so this is happening. What is the lesson for that I have to learn through this challenge? And it was very, very interesting. Also the listening and the process of discovery of why this challenge is happening in our lives, and in a neutral way, try to see what is a lesson that will bring us to a bigger awareness, a bigger consciousness. And this allowed to get out of the, let's say, binary situation or of the locking energies. And it was a process of listening and of inquiry and of being neutral and really stepping into not being possessed by the situation, but freeing up a different perspective, let's say, or a different approach.
Yes. Let me codify what you're offering, Kyriaki. You're saying inquiry is a way to liberate a perspective of seeing yourself from the outside of you, and that can be found through the inquiry itself and can be found and accessed by listening to yourself, listening to how you are listened by another, and listening to how the listening of another is then heard and listened inside you. So there is a three-dimensional listening in that, which we will come back to potentially on the next recording here as we look to further the application. Let me ask Karen, any offering from you about inquiry?
I haven't completely framed it, but it's sort of haunted me from when you mentioned it a while back, to do with the outside and the inside, and you've touched on it in different ways. And I'm feeling it, that I can't really articulate it because it's opened up a new space to do with, I think it's to do with, well, it's partly to do with the preciousness of each unique life, finding their own inner meaning. And it's something to do with how inquiries with that, the helix, the double helix of the outside and the inside, can in a way hone into that place.
Yeah. Well, so you're offering two framings. Let me try and propose language here. Inquiry is a self-discovery tool to discover the precious uniqueness that you are and that you can bring to the ecology that you find yourself in. And inquiry is a process whereby you can harmonize you and the ecology you're in to discover what is conductive for you in that ecology. So all we wanted to do here was to make some starters into this first, why do humans ask questions? And thank you for this. So I know we're running here for a bit, but this is where we were. And I felt that it would be incomplete to leave it with just one space cultivated. So I said, let's cultivate also one of the what spaces. And this is where I've chosen to go. What is the developmental and evolutionary significance of the capacity to inquire? I'm going to do this rather swiftly as a starter. And this is where, so the first thing I do, I lift the question to the top of the loom. I love that feeling that when I ask now, what is the developmental and evolutionary significance of the capacity to inquire? I have a whole playground in front of me. I have no idea what will emerge in this playground. But I imagine it's a bit like when you take the toddlers to the playground and they go up the swings, and that's how I feel when I'm in this space. The conductive, yet to be defined space. And this is where it took me. I paused and meditated the question, the inquiry. And it suggested that the first thing to ask is, what is development? Because if I'm going to be able to play with what is the developmental and evolutionary significance of the capacity to inquire, I have to first deepen into what is actually development. And what opens the permission to develop, and what encourages development, and what defines it. So I went deep dive into the inquiry of what development is, which you could say is larger even than the framing of this loom, and potentially this is why this is hologramic and fractal in nature, because we would need to build the whole loom under the question, what is development? Which we have done in part in my dialogues with David Price Francis, where we explore current openings, and we recently worked into why to develop, so similar space. And then just to feel balanced and complete about this, it became obvious that there was a need to ask, well, if we ask what is development, let's ask what is evolution. and ask within it what catalyzes evolution. Is evolution something that's emergent inside out of its own teleology? Is that the evolutionary dynamic of the process of life? So you really go into evolutionary biology, but you're going into the entire ontology of life and the universe and the emergence of it all. And how can you configure in this contemplative inquiry what catalyzes what? And then what are the markers of evolution? When we as a species, when we evolve, what are the markers of that trace? When you look at any system and it goes through its evolution, what are the markers of that? And that is the inquiry that I have lived into as a permanent line inquiry for now 2-3 decades. And one of the discoveries there is the framing of the sevenfold process structure of the rainbow, not as a theological framing, but as a natural organic appearance of any natural process. So those would appear when you ask not just one afternoon, well, what is evolution? And you look to find whatever the Google search will provide, because the Google search will only provide all the answers that has already been framed. And we are actually seeking to push the void of this inquiry beyond that. And so then it was pretty natural to say, okay, you're inquiring what is development and you're inquiring what is evolution. How do these two processes, evolution and development, how do they relate? How do they correspond with each other? In what situations will you describe that there is an evolutionary process that was unleashed, was catalyzed, that then summons to itself certain development steps? And or in what situations will it be correct or appropriate to describe that you're developing in yourself such to a point that you're catalyzing an evolutionary release in small or large ways in the system that you're part of? That's a fascinating inquiry. I don't know that I'd ever find the full answers for these inquiries, but I'm simply demonstrating that that's going to keep me engaged through to the end of this life and hopefully beyond. If there is the possibility to continue to stay with these inquiries beyond. So that's the power of living into inquiries as a prayerful meditation. Okay, so that's the big picture. And then I said, let's see what else can we propose under this. What is the developmental and evolutionary significance of the capacity to inquire? So it brought me to the pragmatic consideration of a development journey where I would say to myself, where, when, and how do I develop? Can I be forensic in my examination about the circumstances and the situations and the challenges, the opportunities that facilitate development for me, so that I can promote more of that? And how do I evolve? So this is on the line of development. Now I'm back on the parallel line of evolution. How do I evolve as a person? And how do I connect my own evolution, my own development and evolution, to the evolution of our species? That's a very important centering inquiry for me, because I've discovered that there is a huge big difference when you are aspiring to develop certain capacity and you're saying, okay, I'm going to develop it for myself, versus I'm going to develop that such that I'm a better tool for a project that I'm trying to support, versus this is a development that I'm called into, not because I fancy this development, but because I want to be involved in something that's facilitative for something that I believe in and is important. We're living into this experience right here, right now, in the idea that a universalis inquiry, as you suggested, Kyriaki, humanity has reached a point where we need to unlock new possibilities. Mostly what we see in the world is that we are locked in polarizing situations. There is a crumbling. The operating system that brought us here is breaking down. We see it in Europe, we see it in Israel, we see it in the US. Most people try to solve the political, the economic, the breakdown inside in whatever arena, whether you go into the healthcare system, whether you go into the legal system. There are wonderful people with wonderful intent, mostly trying to solve the problem within the framing of the system. My entire adult life has been a journey of discovering that time and again what you actually need to facilitate is a set of inquiries that will take people outside of the context they're in, so they can gain a different set of perspectives of their unique position and challenges and opportunities, and of the other sides of the same argument. At the moment, all the political breakdown that you see anywhere around in the world, nobody is prepared to do that. People are entrenched in their polarized positions. So what we are suggesting here is that if the human together, if humanity is if we are not to blow up this place, if we are to find a way to escape a self-eliminating trajectory that we are on, one of the critical realizations is, well, we've got to unlock the universalis potential, which is seeing human life as a universal property and as a universal agency, that by which I mean inquiring into the potential of the whole, because we are connected. Everything is connected to everything else. That is easier said than done, but what it practically means is integrating all these inquiries, a sample of which is in the inquiries we're framing here. And then I said, okay, let's demonstrate an example of, again, being practical and pragmatic in the personal sense. So I would ask, what has specifically catalyzed development in me in the past. And within those situations, what kind of development was automatic and what was a development that required me to apply conscious choice. There are various situations that I found myself in. I mean, me and my family, we moved from Israel to the US. Right there is a huge developmental exercise. We needed to discover the grammar, the behavioral grammar of a new country and a new culture. Enormous development that was partly automatic and a survival mechanism. And then within it, there are all sorts of chosen development opportunities that I embarked on. So all that is part of the dimensions of the development and evolutionary significance of the capacity to inquire. It's to unlock, part of the significance is unlocking our development opportunities and evolutionary opportunities. And then I said, okay, let's bring some of the other biting questions here. What holds us back? It should say what holds, or what is holding us back from realizing our development potential. I mean, this needs its own loom. You would begin to describe limiting beliefs and limiting habits. You'll go to much more than that in terms of how we are holding ourselves back from our development potential in the environments that we create around us, in the relationship that we cultivate. Right there is a diagnostic loom to be developed. And then what capacities, what character virtues, what connective processes do you choose, do I choose to want to develop? And why? Why would I prioritize these over others? And what energizes and inspires your development? So looking at it again through those lenses. All this simply are, I'm offering these as starters into staying and abiding with the significance of inquiry as a development tool, as a way of living a life into the open-ended potential of what you are becoming, rather than needing to defend who you know yourself to be. That's the bigger context of living into inquiries. It means I love more who I may become tomorrow than needing to defend who I was yesterday. That's the spirit of that. So that's what I did with this what inquiry about development.
Very inspiring.
Yeah, let me frame these questions for you to invite you to offer closing comments to this third recording. What are you taking from this exploration? What are you harvesting about the art of inquiry, about loom work, and about these starters that you find to be useful?
I want to say that it opens up really the potential of inquiry, how this can be a thread or a vehicle that can be the starter of very long journeys of embarking on discovering the truth of things, or what the case actually is for you, but also beyond you and above you. And it kind of sheds and updates maybe a knowing in me about inquiry, because in Greece the word erotisi, which means question, has in the first part of it eros. Eros is love, is attraction. And the idea was that the question, the inquiry, was a kind of good demon in ancient Greece that led you to start journeys towards the core of things, or the world of ideas, or the world of archetypes, where everything merges from, and in a way, you, by connecting there, you become good and virtuous. That was the idea of inquiry in ancient Greece. But the way you approached it, it's really bringing it to the now, and how inquiry can be something evolving, something that you tread together with, and it leads you to many special places, and to new answers, to new solutions, to new options. So it's a freeing mechanism.
Well, thank you so much. It's such an asset that you are in Athens and you live in Greece, and that you obviously carry the significance of the language and its history. So what you just told me, let me see if I can say it back to you in the way I internalize it. Living into inquiry is living into the erotic significance of a life. Yeah?
Yes, exactly. And it's the attraction, in a way, to the homecoming of maybe where we arose from.
That's right. So
coming.
That's right. So in that sense, when we talk about the art of inquiry and living into inquiry as a portal into the universalis potential, we are talking about the eros and the erotic impulse in its universal sense, which is also suggestive, which is part of a different inquiry, that whatever we experience in interpersonal, relational eros impulse and erotic attraction is a human experience and instantiation in the here and now of what is universally pulsating through us, the impulse of life itself. And what the bridging you're offering us is how inquiry is such a core thing for that. So thank you. That's just so majestically beautiful. And I didn't know that. So I feel so enriched by recognizing that is the case. Thank you.
Yeah, how to follow that? I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm going to go back to the thread of meaning, because that was where it started, with the journey of a meaningful journey. And just to weave in one small thread of the matrix, the multiple matrix that you've presented, which will take a while to consider. You talked about, I think it was to do with development or inquiry, but it actually being connected. So, I could inquire about, what I'm going to have for dinner or something. And it's an inquiry and it's valid and it would have the ingredients of an inquiry. but it's inquiries that do the two things that have been the thread throughout this journey, that connect my life to my life, so they have that inner connection, so it has a validity, and then at the same time it connects, and the inquiry has a connection with the deeper truths of where humanity is at this time in terms of the evolution trace, and in terms of, I'm hesitant to use the word responsibility, it's to do with being inquiries that will take us to the edge of where we are. I think you talked about emergent inquiries, to do with accessing threads of emergent possibility, which we're all on the edge of. We're all on the edge of our own lives, in terms of facets or factors or however you add it up. So each life is on the edge of its own life, but it's equally at the edge of this evolutionary wave of where we find ourselves on March the 5th, 2023, give or take a few time differences. And the Ides of March and everything else.
Well, thank you. You're really anchoring us there then at the end of this, Karen. We spoke about how inquiry is a uniquely potent human attribute, and you're coupling that with the recognition that we are meaning making, meaning searching, and meaning making beings, and that the meaning making process is such a central and important dimension of being a human. So how about if we leave it just there, with this conversation? If you stayed with us through to the end of this inquiry, even if you've done it in parts and taken a break, the invitation is to unlock the greater potential of the art of inquiry as part of your own journey to the liberation of your greater potential, and whatever you may find in the prospect of Homo Universalis becoming and living into the next release, the next potential of the evolution of the human model. Until next, in Universalis research number 4. Thank you, Karen and Kyriaki. Till soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.